We've been allowed to stop and spend a little more time with our families. A lot of us have been allowed to slow down our schedules. Spend a little more time at home, to spend a little more time with God. I know that it's taken, teaching online now has allowed us to take our commute down from work from what normally would take me a little over an hour to get up, to the whole process of getting the kids to the bus stop and getting to work was about an hour process. Now takes getting up, getting ready, and all of that less than an hour now. Because I don't have to commute. So before it was a 2-hour process of getting up at 5-something in the morning. Now it doesn't take any of that time because now basically the commute is to go from downstairs, or from upstairs to downstairs and to the dining table where my temporary office has been, or not to the dining table, to the dining where my temporary office has been set. And I sit there and get my cup of coffee, sign into my morning meeting, and that's how my day starts now. So my commute has dramatically decreased. And life is slowed down, but in the moment that we're facing, it seems like we have slowed down, but yet our life has got a little more confusing, a little more busy in the thought process that we're trying to figure out what's next, trying to figure out what is our next move, what's happening. I know Friday was a moment when we go to a store sometimes, and if some of the stores are not as busy as the other stores, some of the stores are not as crazy as the other stores. Friday we went on I went on our bi-weekly trip to Sam's. That's where we do our grocery shopping, and I'm not putting a plug in for Sam's, but we went on our bi-weekly our shopping trip to Sam's and to get our groceries for the family. And then as I went there, the new tradition of standing in line had got there because they only allow so many people into the building, so I had to wait to get inside the store. There's a line to get inside the store, and so many people come out, so many people go in, so many people come out, so many people go in. And that was kind of the thing. So I had to wait around 15, 20 minutes just to get inside of the store. That's changed. That makes us a little anxious. That makes us a little bothered. And then I got into the store and I found gold. If you want to use that word, I found, as many of us know right now, there are certain items that are hard to get, and one of those items is toilet paper. That was the moment that was gold. So as I ran, I took it and I put it under the cart, and as I go into the parking lot, I'm thinking, should I hide this? Is this like contraband? Is this one of those things we put? So there's moments that we worry. And you say, Pastor, what are you getting at? Some of us in this moment have become so involved with what's going on that we've forgotten who we serve. We've forgotten how big our God is. And we become so worrisome. We become so busy with the moment. We become so busy with watching the news. We become so busy with thinking about what's going to happen next. We become so busy with wondering what's going on that we've forgotten even about who God is. And there were some simple words that I titled my message this morning, and it just simply says, be still. And for a lot of us, that's a hard thing to do. I don't like to sit still. You can ask Alicia, it drives me crazy to hold still. If I don't have a project, if I don't have an agenda, if I don't have something to do, I go crazy. I'm like an animal in a cage, and I'm constantly trying to figure out what's next. So I'm always looking for the next thing to do, and I'm always constantly trying to figure out what's to do. But sometimes in life, God wants us just to slow down and be still. But when things are going awry, when things are going crazy, how do we calm ourselves? How do we still our souls? How do we still our minds? How do we still all of those things? Because it's in the stillness that we're able to hear Him. It's in the stillness that we're able to actually see His hand at work. It's in the stillness to understand and see and comprehend that God has it all under control. But before we can see all of those things, we've got to be still. We've got to realize that, hey, if I hold still for a moment, I'll get there. So this this morning we're going to look at a passage of Scripture that many of you have read over the years. Psalms 46 says this. And it says this. It says, "For the director of music of the sons of Korah, according to Alamoth, a song, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High." Sorry, I apologize. "The holy place where the Most High dwells, God is within her. She will not fall. God help her at the break of day. Nations are in an uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done. The desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shield to fire. He says, be still." Listen to this verse. And underline if you've got your Bibles this morning, or if you've got your apps or whatever you use, highlight, do whatever you do. "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us." Listen to that part. Verse 11 says, "The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." As we look at this, I want to start in a different direction. And I want to start in the last part of the verse and then work our way through the verse. So we're going to start at verse 10 this morning. I'm going to look at that verse part that says, "Be still." What does it mean when he says, "Be still"? If we look at the words "be still," and we look at the literal translation of what still means, it says, listen to this morning. These are powerful words. It says to sink, relax, sink down, or hang limp. Be feeble. And I love this part of the translation. Be in a state of lacking power or force, with a focus that the muscles have lost their muscle tone to flex, and so respond to a situation. I love the translation to sink, relax, sink down, or hang limp. Be in a state of lacking power or force. What do you mean, Pastor? Do we roll over and let people know? It's not meaning that. What it means is to be still and let God. Listen to me. Let God take control. Sometimes we're trying to hold so much onto the situation that we're stiff. That we're so stiff. When someone is drowning and they tell you, and I'm not a lifeguard, you can look at me and understand that I'm not a lifeguard, but understanding what they train a lifeguard in. And one of the things they tell you when you're drowning and a lifeguard comes out to you is not to fight the lifeguard. Basically, let them take control. Because the more you fight that lifeguard, the harder you fight, the more you sink, the more you drown. Or even if you've ever been caught, if you that live in Florida long enough, you that enjoy the beach, and have ever went to the beach, and if you've ever been caught in an undertow, and you've ever had that moment of panic, and I've been on the beach, and I've felt the undertow when it grabs you and it begins to drag you out, and it begins to drag you under, and the immense panic and the immense frustration and the immense pull to understand that this is the moment that you could drown. What do they tell you to do in that moment? Is to go with the tide. To almost go in that relaxed feel and just let it take you a little bit until you can get to a point that you can get out. Because the more you fight, the more you battle it, the more you struggle in that moment, the more you become tired, the more you become worn down, and to the point that you are defeated. In our spiritual battles, what happens is so many times we fight it so much. We We struggle so much in trying to fix and trying to wrestle at night on how we're going to figure out everything. What can I do? How can I fix it? Or when we look at a situation that we've been in, we play that situation over and over in our heads and said, well, could I have said something different? Could I have reacted in a different way? Could I have went back and changed something in that plan? Could I have raised that child a different way? Could I have done something different? Could I have put him in church at a different time? Could I have lived my life differently in the beginning? And we play all these scenarios in our head. Or we look at our financial situation and we think about, oh, I did this and I did that, and if I'd have done this different, if I'd have done this different. Or then we try to figure out, well, if I borrow from here and I borrow from there, or if I do this and I do that, and we're trying to fix all the ways. Or we look at the pandemic and we look and we say, well, if they did this, or if I go out and I do this, or if I do this, and suddenly we're in this moment of panic and fear. And what's happened is the worry has become so much in our head that we're straining and we're tired, and we've taken the power out of His hands, and He can't do anything with us because we're stiff. And when we're stiff, He can't move us. He can't do anything with our bodies. He can't do anything with our mind because we become so hard-headed, hard-hearted, that we're not valuable. And what He says is, be still. Let me do it. Let me move you through the storm. Let me direct your steps. Let me take you through the journey. Because if I take you through the journey, you're going to make it. And it's hard. It's hard to give over the control. It's hard to take the problem and just let it go. Especially if you're a fixer. Especially when you're in the middle of the battle. Especially when you're in the middle of the problem. We all know the story in Exodus chapter 14. Listen to these verses. The Israelites are escaping Pharaoh, and it says this, Exodus chapter 14, verses 10 through 14. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and saw them. Egyptians coming at them. They were totally afraid. They cried out in terror to God. They told Moses, weren't the cemeteries large enough in Egypt so that you had to take us out here in the wilderness to die? What have you done to us? Taking us out here? Back in Egypt, didn't we tell you this would happen? Didn't we tell you, leave us alone here in Egypt? We're better off as slaves in Egypt than as corpses in the wilderness. Moses spoke to the people, don't be afraid. Listen to what he says. Stand firm. In other words, in other translation, be still and watch God do His work of salvation for you today. Take a good look at the Egyptians today, for you're never going to see them again. God will fight the battle for you and you. You keep your mouth, and I love what he says to him. You keep your mouth shut. This morning, be still. What Moses was saying is stop. Stop trying to figure it out. Stop looking back. Stop trying to figure out what we should have done and what I could have done. And stop trying to look and say, oh, I'm going to die. This is horrible. Couldn't you just let us die instead of going through all of these things? No. Just stop. Be still. Let your God do the work. particular Psalms, what the psalmist was saying is he understood who God was. And he goes through and he begins to share the things of God. How do we get to a place that we can be in the stillness of God? How do we become still in the presence of God? How do we get to a place that we can just fall back? We've all seen that experiment where someone stands and pastor after pastor has done this. I've done this before with teens. I've done this with adults where I call someone up and I ask them, do you trust me? And they say yes. And then I say, well, if you trust me enough, stand here. And then they fall back into my arms and I catch them. And it's the illustration that if you trust God enough, you'll fall back into his arms. Because you know him. You trust him enough to do that. You can't stand until you trust. You can't trust until you know how to walk. And you can't walk until you know who you serve. You listen to that again. You can't stand until you trust. You can't trust until you know how to walk. And you cannot walk until you know who you serve. This morning, you have to know who you serve in order to be still. If we look at the psalm, it says several things about God, and this is what I want to talk about this morning. Number one is God is your refuge. God is your refuge. It says that there, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. God is our refuge this morning. He is the place that we can run to. And this morning you have to understand that we cannot run. And right now, we live in a world where people are running all different directions. Right now we're looking to all different directions for guidance. We're looking to all different directions for help. We're looking to all different directions to strength. And trying to figure out what's going on in our world. You look at, if you follow the news, and you can look at press conference after press conference after press conference, and they put one expert up, and they put another expert up, and they put another expert on. And every single expert has their plan and their design and how this is going to work out. And I understand, and I love looking at the medical field. And I can run to all of those things, but the one person I've got to run to, the only person that's going to heal our land, the only person that's going to truly heal us is God. He has to become your refuge. He has to become the first person. Listen to that. He has to become the very first person that you run to. When all else is gone, he becomes your refuge. He becomes your strength. He becomes the one that lifts your arm when you're too weak. He becomes the one that takes the steps when you can't take another step. He becomes that one that pulls you along. He's the one that when you can't feel like going up the mountain anymore, the mountain seems too steep, or the valley's too long, he's the one that pulls you along. He's the one that picks you up and carries you the rest of the way. He becomes your refuge. He becomes the strength. He becomes that power. He becomes those things. God becomes your refuge this morning. And they realize that. And the only way that you can be still is to realize that. You've got to go into his shelter. You've got to run into his arms and let him shelter you. Let him put his arms around you. God becomes your refuge this morning. Realize that he's in the midst of that, him becoming your refuge. Realize that he is always there. He's never going to leave you. It says there in that same verse, verse 1, it's such a powerful verse in that psalm. He is our ever-present help in the time of trouble. Ever-present. He never leaves us. And we grapple with that understanding because so many of us have had people fail us in life. So many of us have had things that we trusted that were supposed to be always there. Relationships, organizations, all of those things in life that we trusted. Probably 90% or more have trusted at one point in our lives have failed us. And sometimes we have a hard time understanding that there's something out there that never fails. But church, understand that God will never leave us. He will never forsake us. And He's our ever-present help in a time of trouble. That no matter what happens, He's never going to leave us. He's always there. Number two this morning, in order to be still, in order to understand the stillness of God, is you've got to realize that God is our stabilizer. What do you mean by He's our stabilizer? If you've ever been in a situation where you've been on unrocky ground, or in a bad situation when things are shaky, or the ground's shaky, or all those different things, you've got to find something that stabilizes you. You know, when you go up on a ladder, and I hate heights. I'm scared to death of heights, but I do it. You don't see me climb ladders, but the whole time I'm shaking. One of the things before you ever climb a ladder, you've got to make sure it's stable. Now, I know there's some, I'll use the word because I think they are, crazy people that'll just sit the ladder up and they'll climb the ladder no matter what. They don't worry about stabilizing it. And they never fall. I fall off of a ladder that's stabilized, and I'm scared of them. But you make sure they're stabilized. If you're in a motor home, you make sure that it's stable. If you build a house, you've got to make sure it's stable. In the world of spirituality, in a world that's constantly changing because of sin, we've got to make sure there's something there that keeps us stable. God becomes that stabilizer. He's that thing that keeps our life level, keeps us stable. Realize that He's your stabilizer. He's the one that will satisfy all of your needs. He's the one that becomes that person that does all of those things. Verse 5, it says that, verse 4, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fail. God help her at the break of day. Nations are in an uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts His voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. He is the one that satisfies us. He is the stabilizing. He is the one that protects. He's the one that provides our needs. He is the one that is in control of all of those things. So with all of those things falling under verse 4 and 5 and 6, He becomes that stabilizer. He becomes the one that, and He's satisfying, He's protecting us. When things are shaky, when the world is coming in from the outside, He protects us from those things. Yes, there are battles that rage. Yes, the enemy tries to attack, but He's the one that protects. He's the one that's going to provide that stability in your house, and He will provide your needs. Are there going to be moments that you have a need? Yes. Listen to that. There's going to be needs in your life, but realize He provides the needs. He's going to provide those needs. It says that there's a stream that runs through that city where it provides the needs. That stream is your ever-constant supply. He is that ever-constant supply of what you need in your life. Let Him provide your needs. He becomes that stabilizer this morning. And lastly this morning, God is our victor. And I love that part. God is our victor this morning. Some of you this morning, and I said it this year from the beginning, and I've kept this in my mind the whole entire year, and I reminded myself every week. I remind myself every day. This was, and we claimed it over Lighthouse Assembly of God this year. And I believe it with all of my heart that this is our year of victory. We serve a God of victory. And this, it says that God is our victor this morning. In that passage, we realize that God is the victor. God is the one that overcome the grave. God is the one that overcomes so many things. God is the one that overcomes your sin this morning. He can overcome whatever need it is in your life this morning. God overcome the Egyptians. God overcomes whatever it is in your life this morning. It says he makes wars cease to end on the earth. He breaks, and I love this part, he breaks the bow. He shatters the spirit. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. Be exalted among the nations. The Lord Almighty is with us, and the God of Jacob is our fortress. Whatever spear, whatever shield, whatever thing comes at you, God will break it and throw it down. This morning, whatever disease, whatever war has raised in your life, God will tear it down this morning. Whatever stronghold is in your life this morning, if it's addiction, if it's fear, if it's anxiety, God will break it and throw it down this morning. Let God be your victor this morning. This morning, you have to understand the God that you serve. You can never be still until you know your God. Knowing your God allows you to be still. Knowing that he can overcome all of your needs allows you to be still. Because he takes control of whatever it is in your life. He looks at you this morning and he speaks directly in your heart. Be still and know that I am God. When the Egyptians came up on the Red Sea, they were in a panic. They were ready to give up. They were ready to throw the white flag. Pretty much, they thought they were dead. Right now, there's a lot of people in our world that pretty much think we're gone. Our God doesn't see it that way. Right now, there's some situations in your life that you may think is gone. Be still and know that I am God. Let go. Take your hands off. The word said to sink, to come in a feeble position. Rest in his arms. When we look at the book of John, it says the Holy Spirit comes to what? To comfort. But so he can wrap his arms around you. This morning, remember when somebody just wraps their arms, sometimes you just need those moments. Somebody to wrap their arms around you, and when somebody wraps their arms around you, you have no choice but to be still. In those moments, sometimes it's just to cry. Sometimes it's just to share your heart. But it's to be still. This morning, some of you just need to fall in his arms and be still. Let him whisper into your ear this morning. Whatever the need is, whatever the situation is,